Okay. Good night. Good night. Good night. I know people probably said, "Well, what happened to Therapy Thursday? Um, where y'all been? Uh, ain't it the ain't it the anniversary time? July is the anniversary month, and you guys haven't had anything. Um, Sometimes we gotta take a little bit of break now. We're not all young and snappy like we was 3, 4 years ago. We just grind hard at 1,000 episodes. But we are here. Um, and we're really going tonight have a really good special guest. Fawn is going to introduce that guest, and then let him speak, and then we're going to get into our conversation. First, let me just say congratulations to Tanika. She is the one of the co-founders of Sisters for Sisters. I understand, and she might not be here tonight because she had a speaking engagement, giving a keynote speaking engagement. That's fantastic, and we send her kudos and happy birthday and more, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I don't. I know you probably say a short team. Z's not here. I know that I spoke to her earlier this week. She's probably still on vacation. Um, and Thailand, I don't know. I seen him last night, but he had probably have a lot of stuff going on. So he just got the two therapists. So that's probably even better. The two therapists to do what we got to do. And then we have TD in the building. I don't know if she's gonna say anything.
Good
Um,
evening, good evening, good evening. How are you doing today?
Good night, good night. She is exactly one of the co-founders for Sisters for Sisters. So she may lend her voice and ask some questions or something tonight. So we welcome her as a part of the panel. I'm going to pass it over to Fawn to do the introductions of our guests for the night, and then we're going to get right into it. Um, Skippy, like.
All right, Therapy Thursday. So happy to be back. I am going to try and read this with these aging eyes. I keep telling people I'm a woman of a certain age, so bear with me. Dr. Curtis Callands is an educational practitioner and Philadelphia native who has been embedded in the field of special education for over 20 years. He holds an EDD in educational leadership with a concentration in designing trauma informed care schools, master's degrees in both K through 12 special education supervision and educational leadership, and a bachelor's degree in special education. As a doctoral student at the University of Pennsylvania, he conducted his doctoral research in helping schools and organizations understand and mitigate trauma impact on children by designing trauma informed care schools. As a researcher and practitioner in the field of education, his work led him to design and publish a training manual, a principal's mission in designing trauma informed care schools. For his endless work in the field of education, Dr. Callands was honored with the Legacy Leadership Award from Westchester University in 2020. Dr. Callands is a committed leader who has dedicated his professional career to the field of special education and considering children's unique needs and abilities. He is a leader, consultant, trainer, and principal at the Bancroft School located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, serving students with autism and emotional disturbances in grades early middle school to post secondary. Prior to his position as a principal at Bancroft, he was the principal at Elwyn Davis School and LifeWorks Behavior Health School. As Assistant Chief Academic Officer and Principal for the Chester Community Charter Elementary School and Middle School Administrator at Devereaux Institution, and Special Education Teacher at Northbridge Alternative School in North Penn School District, in the North Penn School District. In his role as educational leader, Dr. Callands is known for his high level of engagement and expertise in the field of special education. He believes in building robust relationships with stakeholders by involving them in meaningful and productive ways to improve student and educator performance. This approach mirrors his process of cultivating collaborative teams among teachers and staff. He enjoys coaching and modeling specialized instructions by building staff and student relationships through engagement. Educational teams are assembled to evaluate, identify, and address student specialized developmental, social, emotional, and academic needs. Dr. Callands is committed to the best practices in high quality education for all children. He understands these best practices through the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. I hope I did that justice because this is actually beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here on Therapy Thursday. So thank you. I'm honored.
Yes, this is that. This. Well, first of all, it speaks to my heart, and I'll let you talk because my baby fits in my 25-year-old fits in the category of the children that you hold so dear. So, when I'm reading this, I'm
I think that I tried. I think it's since been April. It might have been April or May since I tried to get my brother on here because I know his work and his work is in my same wheelhouse, and I know that he's been doing extraordinary things. And keeping with our theme for Therapy Thursday this season is looking at ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We spend a lot of time talking about people, celebrities, and all the hoopla, but they don't really a lot of times affect everyday people and affect large numbers of everyday people. And I think my brother here definitely is doing that, not in just his work in his job, but some of his outside activities. I want him to tell us a little bit about what. First, let me ask this question: how did you get into this field? I know how I got in this field, but how did you get into this field of special education? And I think that's an important thing that most people ask us as Black men, even Black women. How do we get into this field?
Excellent. It started when growing up in the city of Philadelphia, non-area Philadelphia, people known as Philly as like uptown, and kicked out of elementary school. And because I was exposed to domestic violence in my household and also community violence. So the rage was really starting to foster in my body at a young age to become very aggressive and really exude those behaviors. So when I was kicked out of Catholic school and also retained, left behind, I was evaluated. And then I was placed in emotional support. And as I was placed in emotional support, self-contained classroom, I had some very dynamic teachers that really understood the functionality of my behavior. And they channeled my energy, more academics and keeping me engaged at a high interest rate where I was actually mainstream into mentally gifted classes. So it was through those impeccable educators that kind of first planted the seed in me and then I fell in love with Malcolm X and transformation. So I kind of like any of those stories that looked at Transformers, I followed as a kid, I fell in love with it. So when I went to Westchester University, I said, okay, I'm good at math. Let me be a math teacher. But then I played football, was on a football scholarship, and I was earning C's in my math classes, all the way up to Calculus 3. And I interviewed and really find high interest in a beautiful fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And during that interview process, they said, Curtis, you're earning C's. You're looking at your transcripts in math. I said, yeah, it's kind of hard where I'm on a road Friday through Sunday playing football. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to work with children that have the same experience as I did in the levels of adversity. So they said, well, why don't you switch your major to special ed? And at that time, we're talking about the late 90s. I had this negative stigma in the sense of, oh, it's only working with the low incidence population with physical impairments, psychological impairments. So then I made the transfer over from math to special ed. I start earning A's. because I knew all the functionality of the behaviors. The only difference was terminology. So it was sort of like learning the terms, but I knew all the definitions, the examples, because I experienced it. I lived it. I had an IEP. I had impeccable teachers that put certain modifications in place that, really got me engaged. So that right there was really the impetus, the driving force, that once I made that transition, I started to love special education, and I worked at what is known as the Devereaux Institution. It's a residential and day school program for adjudicated young men. And I worked there part time while I was at Westchester University, and I fell in love with it. Fell in love with it, where I was then recruited by the North Prince School District. They were opening up a brand new alternative school with middle school and high school kids. So I was very fortunate right out of college that I was recruited by North Penn School District and to be a special education teacher teaching social studies in an itinerant program. So that was really like the whole catalyst on just my love for special ed.
That I tell people all the time that when you ask a special educator, most of the time, especially black male educators, how you get a special how do you get teaching special ed? They're about to tell you that same they're about to tell you that same story that Kurt told, the same story that I've told. And it's so phenomenal, because I think that is also a part where it sells us to attain the highest level of education, right? And people say, well, I don't understand that. We used to have, listen, I have to agree 100%. I was in a whole nother different state, whole nother different place, another part of the country. And I had really good educators in sixth grade who made the knowledge and said, he doesn't need to be here. He doesn't need to be, he does his work. How did he get in here? Well, I got in there because, similar to Kurt, our exposure to things put us in the behavior. The special education used to be behavior. We didn't have special needs
for boys. Right.
For a lot of the boys, it was just behavior, like behavior. There was no, it was like, oh, what, we can't have these kids in regular class. What do they do? And so let's get them out of these regular classes. But then by the time we get to middle school or junior high school, our attainment and our academics come in play. So I tell parents all the time, don't let people tell you that your child in elementary or early education, that they can't. I've seen more parents buckle down at their homes and say, my child will graduate with a regular diploma, and they'll be somewhere in the top 30 of their class. And people say, what do you mean by that? Because it is not about can you do the work, it's being accommodated and being a worker. I think that no matter what happens, if you do the work, you can do it, because you're going to get your accommodations and get modifications that you need. So it really comes into the family kind of really saying, we want to rally around our child. We want our child to understand that they, as I tell people now, a lot of people say this all the time, I don't talk about anybody having a disability. I use the term, and they say, what I have different ability. Every child I work with, no matter what it is, mental health, different abilities, I just say they have a different ability. They have a different process, because moving that stigma away from it, because a lot of the stigma is what really does the work, and that. So, Brian, I know you had a list of. Well, Kurt, no. Brian had a list of questions.
I find it
interesting. Ask the administrator, because she's curious about why do administrators come up with some of the things they come up with. Probably.
Well, my thing is, Ron, do you remember Devereaux in Daytona Beach?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember working for them. Well, they had actually changed. Stuart Marchman got purchased by Devereaux, so I remember working for them.
Ain't Devereaux up here too, Kurt?
Oh yeah, they're nationwide.
They're
Yeah.
nationwide. Yeah. I was gonna say
Yeah,
they're
I
nationwide.
remember. I think my what troubles me because okay, so I have one of these. I had a little girl who was rare to be in these classes, but she should have been in the classes as she was born with a brain injury. So this wasn't anything that we could have avoided. We did everything that we needed to do, but she just needed the supports. Appreciate the teachers who recognized it. I was that parent who said, nope, not going to do this until the third grade, until she actually absolutely has to do it when she can't reach these markers. However, what I do realize is that I am a privileged Black, right? And Selma, Alabama has helped me to realize that I've had a lot of privileges and I've been able to give my daughter a lot of privileges that some people, it's not the norm for. So I feel like I work in a city of um, special needs. I feel like the entire school is a self-contained classroom.
Absolutely.
And it really doesn't matter what grade level you're on. You could be the valedictorian. I took a group of kids to University of Alabama the other day with an instructor. And I'm ready. I'm in there. And it's cheerleader week and they're pointing at all these things. And I'm looking at my 11th graders who are going to be 12th graders this year. And I'm like, who's going out for the cheer squad? And their hands are like, I am. And then I asked the cheer coach who was with me, how many you think they're gonna make it? He's like, no, they can't compete with these girls. What? These are my top students though. I'm taking my top students. So we're graduating kids where they're saying our kids can't compete at the schools because of their environment. So their environment is making them one big self-contained classroom. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter where you fall in the class. You could be valedictorian or you could be actually in a self-contained classroom. The environment that they're in. So I think my challenge with academia and everything else is when I look at my privileged self, I had, speech therapy, all of these things for my daughter. But I'm looking at some kids who make really good grades who could benefit from speech therapy just because of the environment that they live in. And I know that as an adult, when you step into another place, another environment, that's going to affect your self-esteem. The way you speak, what you're exposed to, all of those things are going to expect. So I think my challenge is, like I said earlier, the non-progressive nature of education. It's the forward, and like I say, coming from an airline, coming from Fortune 500, you're challenged to think 20 years ahead. Because how do we sustainability 20 years ahead when I feel like we're bobbing for air? It's like we're putting band-aids on situations, and I just want to take all of my kids and bring them to my house and be like, I'll teach you. I'll just teach you.
Homeschool.
Even though I don't have the skills to do that, but I feel like we need something more personal, a more deep dive into I appreciate the special education part of it. But for those kids who are just special because of environment, I mean, we had 8 murders in 1 month.
Wow.
And all of those kids in the building was affected by it.
Absolutely.
And if that doesn't make you special needs, then what does? So I guess I don't have a question so much into that, except for how do you conquer the lack of progressive thinking in education? Or do you even see that as a challenge?
It is a challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge in the sense of like, how do we create our own incubator? How do we create our own planet? And my job is, let's give our children the exposure. So then when we bring them back into our school setting, we define the why. We connect the dots on, okay, how do we excel at levels? How do we make our education meaning? How do we apply it? It gives it a purpose. It gives it a drive that's there. And then building their self-esteem and celebrating those incremental steps of growth every day. And say, you know what, you're going to be even better. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to expose you to what's outside your separate community so you can actually see the possibilities. But we're also, too, we're shifting the mindset. For so many years, when we were in school, we were told what? Get an education.
Oh yes.
Get
Well,
an
I mean, let me just put this in here. As a Black woman, I was told all you need is an education. You don't even need
all
that
you
man.
need,
That's a different. That's a
right?
different
All
topic.
you need. But here's what's occurring in the city of Philadelphia, and also in other metropolitan cities. We were taught get this education and then acquire a great job and then gain and pay for some land and you're in the suburbs. Versus, okay, let's take our knowledge and let's mobilize our community where we're gentrifying our community by ourselves.
Absolutely.
But that it kind of goes back to that W.B. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington whole theory there, because we got hit totally hard because we totally followed W.B. Du Bois, and we totally forgot about Booker T. Washington on acquiring land, using our hands to create things, to get into the real estate. It's not a coincidence why they have eradicated the trades out of the urban schools. So we lost total sight of that. I need to get this degree to work for someone else. So with our children, we're like, you know what? Let's take a landscape of our community and let's see how we can gentrify our own community. Let's see how we can build the relationships to get the resources that we need. Let's also manipulate the game on how we can use certain faces to get in certain monetary pieces that can give us some of those loans. That's why I love that movie called The Banker. So that was phenomenal. But once again, exposing our children to those areas of elevated education is the key. So my approach is, I know all the obstacles that's there, but I'm going to teach my kids how to do the hurdle. I'm going to teach them how to dig underground. I'm going to teach them too how to design the hurdle itself. So they know that it's a hurdle, but when they see it, they design it and they say, I know how to walk around it.
Yeah, I love the mindset of like Ron knows we chose to come and live right in the heart of the foolishness that's going down. But the one thing that I'm trying to make a reality, or I'm trying to expose these jobs that were created to make the middle class. So you have these pilots. Now, this is the best example that I can show you. I don't really know too many formally educated pilots. They're in the transportation industry. And whenever you land on a Southwest Airlines flight, a pilot may say, you just had the safest part of your journey. But they make probably 7 times more than a bus driver. Where the skill set for that bus driver, it takes more hours to be a pilot. But once you get there, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So your critical thinking skills are not as useful as they are as a bus driver. But look at who traditionally has a bus driver job and who has a pilot job. And so I keep trying to get my kids to see, hey, you got to look at these jobs that were actually created for the middle class. And when you say that they took out what they realize is, these plumbers are becoming the middle class. Like these, our people that put up the lights around here, they go to the electrical school, they're coming out with a certificate making $90,000 with a certificate. It's like, but nobody's really talking about this stuff. We took it out. It was demonized to be these things. And so I like bringing it back to just kind of, I like you saying, bringing it to exposure. And I think it was an exposure that our generation actually missed, because we were on the shoulders of our parents. And, they told our parents that they weren't anything because they weren't educated, and they were going to educate us. You were going to be educated. And I can remember wanting to go to the Navy and my mom saying, no, you got to go to school. When I'm looking at all of these veterans retiring, making tons of money in second careers and all of these other things. So I love the exposure, and I love that our generation we're brave enough to expose them to everything.
Absolutely.
To say, go do everything. Go touch and feel everything. And I think that takes a certain amount of bravery, which is why I was telling you earlier, my hat goes off to education, to Educator, to the teachers and the principals and the therapists and the counselors that are sitting in there every day. It's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to come every day. How do you take care of yourself? That leads me into self-care. How do you take care of yourself?
Absolutely. So for me, I go to bed early. I have 3 wonderful little girls, amazing wife. My girls are 14, 10, and 5. So
No.
I send them to bed early. So 8 o'clock, 8:30, and 9 o'clock. And I'm usually in the bed either 9 or 9:30. And I wake up 4:15. And as I wake up 4:15, I'm at the gym. So I go to the gym. The gym has been my outlet since the age of 13 years old. So I go there and it forces me to consume large amounts of water that can hydrate my body. It helps me to alleviate the endorphins, the stress that's there. But I also had to change it up because at first I was lifting the weights and not doing any exercising on the heart
Yeah.
until I hosted a blood drive for sickle cell anemia, and they said, Dr. Curtis, your pressure is high. And I said, hold on, man, I work out. What are we talking about here? They said, yeah, what are you consuming? Yeah, I eat Chick-fil-A 2 times a week. I go to a Wawa at least 2 times a week, and then I only warm up the heart, only cardio for 5 minutes, and then I just hit all these weights. They said, you got to reverse it. You got to take that fast food out. And I thought Chick-fil-A was fine. Well, no, it was those waffle fries and also the chicken. Got to question that chicken that's there. So,
I mean, they're getting it in bulk. It's
oh,
suspect.
you're right. But I started doing 25 minutes to 30 minutes of cardio before I touch any weight. I had to make it a priority there. So I had to be very methodical as my body matured. I had to make those adjustments. So you're looking at the self-cares in the morning time, but then also too, here's a key of being present when I come home. No technology, no phone. I need to just show signs of gratitude and just look at my children, look at my wife that makes us a meal. And I said, thank you, because it's love in that meal.
Right.
So it's more of like, how can I have this metaphor of you never see a fireman walk in his house with his boots, his coat, and his hat on. He leaves it where? At the station. So that stress, leave those duties, leave it at the school. That school building not going nowhere. It's still gonna be standing.
Right.
But that's a muscle. Easy said and done.
Intentional. You have to be intentional.
Keep training that brain, mindfulness, empty, because those thoughts are coming. Those thoughts will keep coming. So it's more like, you know what? Let me put away technology to try to entertain myself from social media, and let me just interact and have some meaningful conversations with my kids. Tell me why you like, this particular dial baby, or tell me about swimming. How did you feel when you got that certificate? Like I want to hear those stories and savor that moment. And then with my wife, I want to be present and engaged. That's important, because I think once I focus on what I have and show signs of gratitude, it helps alleviate the stress that's there. Holding the hand, those chemicals, oxytocin, you get those chemicals. I have a cat, petting the cat right there, even though cats, we forbid them with bras as cues, but you know what I mean? This is an animal to keep the mice away. So it's just those little things there that just helps me to just have a peace of mind.
I think that is so important that you say that, Kurt, because when we are single, right? When we are single people working, we take on this mantra that we're going to do the best job ever, and we don't have anything to do at home, right? So we take work home, we do things. But when we begin to have a significant other partner, we begin to have, I'm so glad that it's interesting that you would go there because this is a big part of what we like to talk about. Black marriage and family. This is a we're a big Black marriage and family crew. We like to talk about how do we be successful and in our relationships and what things you just gave a beautiful narrative of what people should maybe even try to do. Leave the work at home. I mean, at the job. Listen, they have these little memes that I seen one time. There's a girl, Veronica. Her name is Veronica, and the manager always comes and say, "Veronica, can you do this?" And Veronica explains why she can't do this, why she's not going to do that because they're not paying her for that time to use her phone at home. She's not answering emails when she's at home with her family because she's giving them the same credit and time that you're asking me to give at the job and the focus. And when we are able to do these things, we're able to be. I love that you said it. We're so much more fulfilled when we get the energy from our family. People don't realize that. You're looking for a lot of people go and look all in the streets and all these different places for that kind of energy, but there's nobody's gonna give you the same energy like your partner and your children because they love you unconditionally and genuinely. So it ain't like, oh, Kurt be lifting the weights with us. That's why we like them. No, the kids don't care if you lift weights.
They don't care.
They love their daddy because their daddy is going to come, talk to them, be with them, and spend time with them. So this hey, what you just said there was a phenomenal thing that I hope people were listening to and being able to say, maybe I'm going to try that. Maybe I'm going to come home, put down the phone. Let the social media and the trap of my life maybe somewhat put down the phone. But don't we want you to watch therapy. This was a little therapy. But you don't have to watch hours and hours of reels of what I have learned to begin to deduct and in my work with a lot of clients now that I'm having in the city is these constructual messages that are telling them things that's not valid to them as a person. Somebody is coming up with these things. These are the things you should have in a relationship. If a person doesn't do that, listen, you can't, none of those things should be important. None of those things should be the thing that is affecting who and what you are, because you should be determining how your relationship is and what happens in your relationship and how you interact. I think you showed a perfect example of that when you say, look, I come home, I give my kids the time, I give my wife the time, and then I take my behind to bed and get my 8 hours so I can get up in the morning and do it all over again. And that's a big part. If you want to, if you would like to stay more than anything stress free.
Mm-hmm. And Ron, we talk about it all the time. That's going to be a complete unlearning that we have to do as a people, because the social construct of what they've said we should be doing is just not, Dr. Callands has said. And you actually remind me of the other brother that was on, I can't remember his name, but he was actually single. And he was saying that he was, now looking for his wife. And he kind of said some of the same things that you're saying, but it took him a while to get to knowing what he needed to do to be that successful husband again. So I'm very proud of the men that have been coming on here, because it's not shown enough. You guys are
the men that have been coming on here. There's only one type of man that been coming on these shows. Listen, if you look in the background of every man that's been on this show, only person that ain't been that person, I say, is Tony Servaz.
Tony Servaz.
Tony Servaz.
I can acknowledge
on
it.
This show has been.
Hey, listen, I will say the Omega Man, even though I'm kind of anti. I denounce. No, I do not denounce. I do not denounce. Yeah. I do not denounce anything. I'm just whatever. Okay, the Omega Men, I'll say that have been coming on the show. I just wish that there was more exposure. I wish that people could hear you guys say these things. I wish that women could hear you guys say these things, because, and I'm gonna get back to the point that you're on here for, but that releases us to be able to break those social constructs, because we want to be in these relationships that look like how we need them to look, not how society says they're supposed to look. Like, where in your case with your wife, society might say, well, he doesn't stay up 2 hours later with you talking, doing this. No, that man got to go to bed because he needs to be up at 4:15, and he's given me so much intentional attention in this 2 to 3 hours that he's been home. He's given it to our children. He's done enough, and I'm okay, and he is enough. It's very hard sometimes, and I don't speak for all women. I can just speak for myself. It's very hard sometimes to say that's enough. I have enough. He's enough. Like, it's almost like how you guys are intentionally making these strides to be in your relationships, to be present. I think I am now intentionally making these strides to say, this is enough. Right here, right now is enough. Whatever it looks like right here, right now, today is enough. You don't have to measure yourself up to all of these social constructs that say, oh, you guys should be, you should get off work and, I don't know, y'all should go to Paris every night and come back. And unfortunately, with social media and things, you'll go down a rabbit hole thinking, he worked 8 hours, he's supposed to clean, cook. It's just a mess. So what I can say is I appreciate that. As a woman, I appreciate the effort that y'all are taking to make these intentional steps so that we can be safe in doing it. For me, safety is a big thing. So I need to be safe in my relationship so that I can just be present in that relationship. But I want to go back. No, go ahead.
No, I mean, listen, if I never apologize for going to where our core is, right?
Because we always just take it.
We always don't go to our
help
core.
But take it there. We're going to ask you to bring your wife in the screen next.
Right, exactly. They're going to say, bring the kids on. Let's have that interview. Because that is so much like the work that you do, Kurt, is wonderful, right? And you are a model in your workplace. But people don't see enough of the model of what you are as a husband and a father, right? It's like you're not just good at work. You're not just a work person doing this at work. This as you said, transforms from your work to your family, to your wife, to your children, and so on across the board. And that is so important because we don't get enough images. We don't get enough messages. We don't get enough exposure. That we talking about education. We don't get enough exposure of seeing that to be able to establish and have these healthy relationships that we are striving and wanting to have as men and women a lot of times. And not just men and women, but as children and parents. And I can say this because I work day in and day out. In the morning, I work with kids in the school. And in the evening, I work with their families and individuals doing therapy. So I am tuned 100%. And then in the nighttime, I work with fathers. So my day breaks down and crinkles into really looking at the core of humanity and what is happening to us in our Black community.
Right.
And being able to establish and show some models of what we need to be doing in education. Like, we need to have these kind of courses. Listen, I'm going to run a classroom, a social emotional classroom for elementary school kids. They're giving me the freedom to do it any way I want. We're going to do academics, but we're going to do so much more social emotional community building. Not an individual kid I take somewhere in a corner and work with him, because that's not the world we live in. We don't live in isolation. We don't live in silos. We live in a community where we need to be able to communicate, be able to hold each other accountable, be able to help each other. So I'm going to use that classroom as my Peachtree dish to really establish something that hopefully I can say to school and say, hey, let's write something on this, and let's show other schools, other districts, other places that this could happen with this population of kids that you have kind of, as I say, you had them in self-contained, you said this was unfair, then you threw them in inclusion, and then it was even more unfair, and now you say, oh, we're going to put them back in self-contained, but they're not in self-contained. They're coming to their own social emotional classroom where everything is catered to them, not a byproduct. Just come in here, sit down, here go a worksheet, worksheet.
Do what the other kids are doing, just do it with more time. Do what the other kids are doing, just do it with more time.
With more time,
you can't do what the other kids are doing.
Like, more time, adjusted curriculum, and the biggest part is at the end of every day, having an opportunity that's the whole class for us to sit Indian style in the back of that classroom and talk about how was our day and what happened and how we're going to take that into our homes, back to our phone, and how we come back the next day. That we don't have time for, right? You don't have time for. You actually don't have people, districts who are interested in saying, hey, what about academics? What about their testing? What about, listen, these kids, if we can get them to buy into this and buy it, they can sit for an exam with their accommodations and make an equivalent score than the other kids, because they will now have the empowerment, and they also have the exposure to something being about them. But so often, everything they get is punitive. It's a punitive experience that they get, and everything that all the attention they get is usually based on negative behaviors. So it's looking at changing that dynamic and being able to bring this idea. So it has an effect. And the way I always look at it, you can do that within the school. And people say, oh, the kids stay at home, they can't change their parents. It's not true. I worked long enough as a therapist to know that children can manipulate their way into all kinds of things. So if they took the skills that they learned of social emotional learning in the school and took it to their home, their parents would have to abide and follow and be a part of it. It's very difficult not to be. So
Omega Docs. So okay, I want to hit on this trauma. Your passion is these trauma-informed care schools. I want to know, are you seeing acceptance? I don't know if people understand trauma. I don't know if they understand that you being a product of, okay, I saw domestic violence. I'm watching this show on Netflix. These Netflix shows they have me in a chokehold sometimes. Okay. I'm watching this show, this young man, the show is I Killed My Father. If you guys get a moment to look at this show, it's not what you think, but the adults, he did kill his father. The powers that be are trying to say that this kid was not traumatized. They are literally having to give definitions of trauma when we're looking right at the trauma. So I'm wondering, have you had any, and if y'all get a minute, even if you could show it to your teachers, I killed my father. Okay. Everybody. I'm walking and I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. This is all the way trauma. But I think that as Americans, and then I have another story attached to it, we have been, or I can't even say Americans, as human beings, trauma, if it didn't kill you, then it's not considered trauma to somebody else. And a lot of us have these positions where we're over children. And you may have experienced the same trauma that this child has experienced, but you don't identify it as trauma because it didn't kill you. So they should get over it. So I'm wondering, have you had any resistance with the trauma model in making people understand the levels of trauma or what trauma could actually be? And here's the other part to it. I sat in a PD, sat in a personal development where there was a man who he was a motivational speaker. I was telling Ron about this earlier today, and he challenged us to write down one trauma that's happened in our life that we've never told anyone. I find that difficult because I'm a therapist who's been in therapy for a long time. So all of my traumas have come out some kind of way. There were teachers that from 1 year to 30 years who wrote down things that floored me, like incest, victim of incest, molestation. A teacher punched me in the face. One teacher told me I would never be anything. it was impactful for me because this is a stranger that the session was 45 minutes. You told a total stranger this trauma, but you've never told anybody else. Do you understand trauma?
Mm.
So I wonder, what resistance do you get from it? And do you find that people actually understand trauma, or are they living in trauma?
It's both. It's both that they are living in trauma. Some don't understand the trauma, and some are just captivated in traditional norms. I see that with some teachers. Some teachers where they're engulfed in traditional practices that takes punitive measures. So when you're asking them to use a lens of empathy, that they kind of struggle with that because they reflect back on their interactions with their teachers and the standards that they had to adhere to in the classroom. So for me, it takes time. It's a process. Um, but it's also too celebrating their small wins and their attempts on changing their mindset of how they view and understand through their lens what is trauma. Um, Working with a population currently now with children with autism, that I was at a particular school and we had a child that egressed on a teacher a number of times, and the teacher experienced a number of concussions. And that parent respond, "Oh well, my child hits me in the car while I'm driving. That teacher will be just fine." So you had a parent that normalized the trauma,
Mhm.
the physical abuse, and placed that same energy and emotion on the actual teacher, that they should endure and endure that event and those experiences. So it's my approach is more of like how to make those incremental steps and growth towards changing the narrative on understanding trauma, or we all know ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So it's really helping them with a gradual process of just expanding their horizon that's there, but also building up their toolkit is the key. So it's like, okay, you brought it to my attention, I get, I understand, but what do I do in the classroom? What do I do in the school setting? What do I do in the community? How do I cultivate change and make it meaningful? So it's a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, that takes me into the supports for the teachers. I walk around the school and I want to sometimes give out hugs because I'm like, man, this teacher, I don't think I ever realized how the 8 murders affected the
Oh,
teachers.
it does.
How we just had a young boy die at the hands of, we actually had one get shot in the head and survive. And then we had one die at the end of the school year at the hands of one of our other students. And I'm like, the support that teachers need is almost intentional. It almost needs to be as intentional as the other relationships in our life.
They
It's like, it is. I don't know, how do you make your district leadership understand and know that this has to be every day, all day, that we are giving these teachers this support, while the accountability approach, of course, the accountability piece has to be there, of course. um but what I find is that we're doing a lot of pounding on the test, pounding on what we're doing, and we're ignoring the fact that these teachers a lot of times are social workers, therapists, untrained social workers, therapists, moms, aunties. In the Black community, everybody's your auntie. I don't know how many of these kids are call me mama, ma, auntie, because they're looking to me for that validation. And so I wonder how, at the district level, do you have any challenges with that? Do you have any challenges? I know you work at a private school now, though,
Well,
right?
no, yes, we still experience challenges, but I try to show them that I'm making data driven decisions
Yes.
in the sense of, okay, we know about the teacher shortage. Okay, we want to retain my teachers. Here's how we need to change our system. And here's the approach. So what I've done at my previous school was what we did is that we altered our school schedule where we made sure that certain teachers had the same prep periods as other mentor teachers so they could be able. So I had to create these safe spaces in the schedule for the teachers to come together in the morning, also after school, during the school day. Then I looked at about 4 locations all throughout the building where I said, you know what? We got sensory room for our kids. We're going to transform these spaces and create sensory rooms for our staff members.
Mm-hmm.
And we created where it's like radiant sunlight that's there. It's couches. It's a Zen atmosphere where they can go during their prep period and just decompress from the day. So a lot of times we design our schools based off the children needs. We alter that approach. But the way I was able to alter that approach is that, number one, they believed in me, they recruited me, they gave me the autonomy as well to cultivate change. But I also showed them the data from looking at exit interviews of where teachers expressed that they were stressed out, they were burned out. So we knew it was a mental health approach that we had to really accomplish. And we had to change the wording. Instead of self-care, which you do independently, we had to transform it into organization care.
No, I love that.
Organization care is that we create the systems that support wellness. All this from the schedule to the physical environment to looking at our PD, where we're being very intentional with in-service days, where we brought in a plethora of different experts and we did our yoga, we did our hip hop dance, we also did our African drum circles. So we were very intentional on like, you know what? I'm going to cultivate and create a mental wellness program for our staff members. And we're going to pour our energy into our faculty, and our faculty will reciprocate that same energy back into the children.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm going to steal that organizational care. That is great. I see Tylon on here.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Hey, Tylon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I on? Am I on? Okay, hi. I'm sorry for being late. I thought that we were going to start back in August, but anyway, I'm just. I don't know if you noticed. I was Mentor of the Year in 2016, and I'm a huge advocate for mentorship being a centerpiece of every school's community. I think that it's important, and it was also a lot of data that supports that it's very effective. It was under the ADP program here in New York City. I mean, attendance and AI improvement funding for it. But I find my frustration really comes from they have all this data and they know it works. You would think that with data and understanding what works, that the system would be better. I wonder if you have the same concern as data being used to actually circumvent real improvement.
Let me share this. You can manipulate data to say anything. Period. You can manipulate and say, this right here, the majority of it is empty. Or you can say, look, this is the best tasting water, and I'm gonna savor this right here because this is gonna hydrate my body.
Right.
That's what I've learned throughout my years. It's the presentation that you use the data to drive your narrative. That's the key. So I had to use that data to say, look, I'm going to show you. And then also I'm going to solicit feedback. That's going to be my formative data. That's going to show and say it's successful. We're going to retain more teachers. But you're absolutely right. That data can be used. It's a dichotomy in it. In a sense that it can be used in positivity. It can be used in negativity.
Right. It's sort of like it can be clear on, hey, this worked. Like your program, the things that you're doing, it sounds like it works, and you would think that you would duplicate, or the things that work, you try to duplicate it as much as possible. But I found that and I've worked in over 16 schools in New York City area, helping them set up school-based mentorship programs where the people are vetted, I found that everyone was happy and pleased that it worked, and they seemed like they would always come out whenever there was politicians and folks coming, oh, this is a great model, we want this school to be a model school, and but you don't see the level of duplication of things that work, at least here in New York City. and it just got me scratching my head and saying, okay, and I'm putting my because conspiracy theory on is that it's in a sense they want improvement, but just on the margins. They don't really want things to work.
Tylon, I have to say that I completely agree with you. I mean, there are so many times that you and I are at an agreement on these things because I don't know if we change the system. So, okay. When I look at the education system, and this is where I say I have to leave completely, why it doesn't fit like who I am as a person. I hate to do this, but this is the first time that I've ever actually been able to compare it to say I actually think that there is a prison to pipeline, prison to, what do they say? Prison, high school to prison.
School to prison pipeline. Yeah.
It's literally set up the same way. I'm looking at schools that are set up the same way as prisons. Our kids walk in a single file line to the cafeteria, and I'm thinking, what are they going to do in between this classroom and here? But the one thing that I discovered is both of those things are measured the same way. So when you think about school systems, how you measure the success, and I could be wrong with this. This is my own little Black girl mind going. You measure the success by your graduates, right? How many people graduate? You ultimately graduate these kids. You kind of stop. In my program, I think we have to track the people 1 year afterwards, right? But what we know is that these kids graduate at 17 and 18, and you got a full life ahead of you, more than 1 year ahead. So my thought is the data is already flawed, because at 18 or 19, it doesn't show anywhere, it cannot show you how I've been successful in life. It cannot. I mean, it's no different than the way that they judge a person being rehabilitated in prison is that they don't come back. But you could still be committing crimes. You literally could still be a criminal and just never get caught. So I'm like, these institutions are so similar, and they will never fail because of how you measure the success. Where I'm looking at not 18-year-olds, I'm looking at 19, 20, 21-year-olds just sitting on the couch, not doing anything. If it worked, we'd all be rich. If the way school works right now actually worked, everybody would be employed, and we would all have, there would be no poor people. If what they're saying, if how they're saying that school actually runs, and I really thought that COVID was going to force them to change how we did school. But we went right back to the same thing because of that manipulation of the data, because we don't really follow kids after 18 or 19. Because once the kid with autism from a lower group gets on Social Security, they're in a different group. You kind of lose track of these people. So I probably went on a tangent there, but I follow. I'm just super confused at why no one is held accountable to create real life. I guess I'm gonna say data driven, but even just like I want to know some real shit.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Callands, do you feel like, the way that your approach also that you hit this wall, like, where you have even beyond data, you have, successful, driven, tangible kind of markers that you set up, and you say, hey, this is work. And then you may even get the proverbial pat on the back. Hey, yeah, this is great. We like what you're doing here, this, that, and the other. But you just don't see the energy and effort put behind models that that work even beyond the data and the statistics and things like that. But just I mean, there are things that you can tell even in the way students walk in certain schools, whether the environment changes and the school community's environment changes, even around the surrounding areas here in New York City. And I just got a sense that somewhere on high they said, well, this is nice. We like this, and then all of a sudden some of the funding disappears and it's just not duplicated, and they just keep coming out with something new and some newfangled terminology and and here's try this methodology, and not sticking to the kind of things that you alluded to and that you do that actually works. And I think you can't train educators to care. That to me is the secret sauce, and what happens is they drain all these passionate people like yourself and other teachers, and I've seen it happen. Teachers that, like, they're just coming in for the first time and they got all this energy, and in about 2 or 3 years they're like burnt out. And so I love that the focus is also on the teachers and the people who are providing, because they are not just teachers, they are social workers and correction officers, or we wear many hats, especially as Black men in schools, because there I always feel like there's an undertone of you don't belong here. Oh, that's a really good question. I want to ask you too. Because most of the men in the New York City schools, I would dare to say, a large percentage of them are either openly gay or ambiguously gay, and saying that a lot of the models of masculinity in the schools, the kids kind of gravitate to it in a way, but the administration does not. Have you had any experiences like that, or similar experiences in your career, Doctor?
Yes. It's an attack on masculinity. It's an attack to try to force men of color to conform, assimilate. It's very prevalent here. I'm outside of Philadelphia. I'm born and raised in Philadelphia, but you go into the suburban area where there's 2 different sectors. You go into the suburban area, they want you to look approachable, which means glasses, no facial hair. You have to make the suburban Caucasian feel comfortable to approach you and ask questions. And then if you're a certain stature, I was fearful, I was intimidated. So you run into that roadblock in the suburban areas. And then in the city of Philadelphia, you have in central office, when it comes to administration, is dominated by women of color. And it's sort of like a conglomerate there, because they have been for so many years, they have been oppressed with job opportunities, that they shift the tide and say, you know what, we're going to make it all like a feminist movement. And then if we do have a male of color, he's a homosexual. So he's right aligned with the agenda. So then you ask the question, well, where is the man that is, that encapsulate a variety of different characteristics of masculinity that's there? It's attacked, it's feared. So for me, it always felt like, okay, you got a code switch, you have to certain gestures, you got to smile a certain way. And for me, I reached at a space where I'm not conforming. I'm going to be my organic self. And then you're going to call me by my name and my title, which is doctor, because I earned that. You're not going to just say, hey, Curtis, how you doing? No, we're not doing that in that workplace environment. You're going to respect my expertise, my credentials. Plus, for the summertime, I trim my beard down, but I usually let it grow. That's it, because it encapsulates my culture in my area, my community. So yes, it is a true attack, and it's very subtle.
It's prominent throughout all of education. I told Ron I probably can't share the podcast this week on my page, because I see what you're saying, and I'm thinking, how from board to central office, and I'm thinking, listen, you guys, and I'm not a feminist, but I believe strongly in what I feel are my equalities as a woman, as a Black woman, right? But I don't think that they have to take away from the role of the Black man and how I want that role to be in my life, and how I know the strength and how that injects strength into our children, into our communities, and how, even if we go back to slavery or wherever, when it was taken away, it was the complete demise, the beginning of the demise of who they who we want it to be, or they tried to do that. I'm looking at the field of education, and I'm like, it is too top heavy with women, or it's too top heavy with men that are not showing up in a masculine way.
So,
And I don't care what your sexual orientation is.
Right.
But the thing is, these kids, when you think about middle schoolers, someone told me these kids can go into school a child and leave having a child. The impression that we have on these children, because I sound like a racist right now. I have plenty of gay friends, and I really do. I was a flight attendant. Okay. I have plenty of gay male masculine friends. They don't try to hide who they are. They're just gay men. I wonder how I don't even know if we could tactfully call out that you're putting certain positions in the hands of people because you want to control the narrative of how this comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But let me say this, and you guys bringing this up, and we have to go to how. Okay, so I have made a really big point recently, looking at the BET Awards, right? And there were a lot of people saying, "Oh my God, the BET Awards was like just a woman fest of whatever, right? Of not favorable type of performances and things that equality." So I said to somebody that we didn't think about this 10 to 12 years ago when we talk about Black Girl Magic, right? Black Girl Magic was all the rage. It was like, we got to empower the young ladies. We got to do this and do that. And at the same time, I used to argue and say, but what happens to the boys? And what you end up beginning to see is when you don't.
Black Girl Magic. I'm sorry.
When you go, see, there you go. When you go into the school and you see a class that is an EBD or emotional support class or behavior class, it is full of young men, right? And then if they are not in that class, they go to the most masculine man who's at the school class all the time. And what you find out is that the system has become very feminine overall. So it's almost a biased school towards boys, right? Truly. And people don't want to acknowledge that, right? It's a bias because boys who act like boys act. Like if you had a male teacher, the male teacher would be comfortable with the rough housing, certain things that the male teacher would understand because as a male and maybe as a father, he understands that these are skills that these are ways that boys be. But if you make the whole system saying the model for how students should act is how a young lady should act in the class, then you are causing a problem for the male students because they're never going to act like female students. Even if they are, non-binary or whatever, they're still going to have their masculine parts that come out in their behavior. And we have to begin to start, reevaluating that in a reference to, because we see an outcome of that.
Can I say this, Ron, to that point? Because I think this is important to point out. It's not the same in Suffolk County. Suffolk County in New York City is a mostly white community. When I was at that school, not only the coach in the typical places where you will see male teachers, but you had them as English teachers, social, and they were clearly heterosexual. There was no ambiguity because I don't get into conversations with people do sexually. That's their business. But clearly you could see in other schools where the population is mostly white that they make sure that they have a balanced depiction of the community working in that school in certain positions. I think that this is unique, and this is my theory, but based on my real experiences, and I'm not going to invalidate my real experiences. That here I'm in Suffolk County, mostly white school, many males, right? And it's clear who they are, and they have these role models. It seems like this is very unique to Black communities. Or the school, and I know that was one school, and that would be a legitimate argument. Say, well, Tyler, but the sampling could be flawed. But and the overwhelming majority of the other schools, there's mostly white women, Jewish women, other women, feminists, and gay men, and at the bottom is straight heterosexual men who may be like maybe one or two who may be that coach, or was Mr. Johnson was actually Mr. Johnson in one school was he was a former basketball player, and he was the assistant principal, of a particular school, and they gave him guff. He had zero respect. So I do think that sometimes in our analysis, and we have to kind of look at race and how that also impacts, like what they're doing in other schools where they're not having as many what do you call it, disciplinary issues. They're not having as many what do you call suspensions.
Well,
which
tell them they are. I
mhm.
mean, let me tell you something. When they had the grading scale in Florida and the many other schools, even in Philadelphia, those schools do not report the incidents because they know that the incidents affect their grade for their school. Now, if you get caught not doing it right, it's going to be on Channel 6 News. It's going to be a major thing. But in many instances, I worked at school in a blue ribbon school in Florida,
right?
And the majority of the school was drunk on gin and vodka. Right? The SRO.
Literally.
No, I mean kids was passed out, falling, and the SRO wanted to do something about it. The principal said, "Nope, you ain't doing nothing about it. Call every one of these parents and bring them in, have them come get their kids from the school."
Because you don't want to.
The SRO was so livid because she said that, they all just committed it was a crime done, and these things. But the principal was not going to let that affect her blue ribbon school, and she could call all the parents and get them in and make it everything go away, sweep it right under the rug.
And Tylon, that's where we have that problem that you're talking about.
Yeah.
When you're talking about, okay, the breakdown of, okay, now this is not happening. That principal shouldn't have been under that amount of pressure because I don't see that principal as a bad person. You're under so much pressure to keep this blue ribbon status that you're actually breaking the law because these kids are being abused. You're a mandated reporter. You got to report these things. But can you imagine the amount of pressure that principal is under to keep this blue ribbon status that you have decided to just let drunk kids walk around your school? It's like you just said, so why is this not reported? Why do you really think, or do you guys really think that the powers that be that are making those decisions in Tallahassee don't know that this shit is going on? And why are we not addressing that?
Right.
It's like the pressure. I think I remember when Jeb Bush was in Florida and we kind of started that whole No Child Left Behind went on and we started getting the grades and all of that good stuff. And I remember my daughter, I remember them telling me specifically, she does not have to come to school today. Because I have refused to let her go into self-contained classrooms at that point. So we were gonna make it through until we couldn't. I remember them saying she does not have to come to school today. Because they didn't want their grades affected. They didn't want their grades affected by her taking the test. And I'm a sensible person, so we probably went to the zoo or something that day. But it was like the trauma being normalized. It was normalized for them to cut corners and not report things because they're also like children. I think I've discussed this with you, Ron. They're being treated from the top. They're being treated in a certain way, and then you're in return treating the children a certain way. Like you are being expected to live up to an expectation that you can't. So they put it on the children and make them do it as well. And now you got these drunk kids in Florida on gin and vodka. And the next thing is that somebody's gonna kill somebody in a drunk driving accident.
Dr. Callands, are you generally hopeful? I mean, if you could break out your crystal ball and kind of look into the future, are you optimistic? Do you see? Because I'm no longer with the Department of Education in New York City, at least in New York City. But I just take my mentorship in every aspect of that. Like generally hopeful, and where do you see like a specific area that perhaps we're not focused on that we all should be focused on? So it's one question is the hopefulness of the future of education. Should we come up with our own system? Should we all be Dr. Umar's, right? Or should we look at a specific area that we need to pay more attention to?
I think for the field of education that we have to just change the mindset on just supporting and nurturing and fostering a generation of Black male educators. And the ones who are leading that charge have an agenda where they embrace masculinity. Because let me share with you why. We had a consortium in the city of Philadelphia, Black Male Symposium Consortium, a couple of years ago. And I attended and I looked at the title and I said, okay, Black Male Consortium. And I looked at the presenters, and half of the presenters were women. And then the other 50% of the males, 25% were homosexual. So they really had 75% like a feminine view perspective. And I said, something's not right. What agenda are they pushing, actually? I'm wondering that. And it was almost like really fostering and nurturing and creating a space for homosexual men to major and change their career in education. That's how I perceived it. Because even though they said it was a Black male symposium, the presenters, they all really had a particular narrative that was there. So I think we have to dismantle it a little bit. It has to be very strategic, because here's why. You have a population of males that may pursue higher levels of education. You have to make it a desirable and invest in education as being a really financial, suitable career and worthy. So because what's happening is that we have this pool of men of color. They'll go, and we know they all major in criminal justice. Everybody wants to be a police officer or an FBI agent, but we're not making. So they make that field sexy and authoritative, but they don't make education in the light of being like, empowering, worthwhile. So I think we need to change that narrative where it goes into the middle school level, high school level. But once again, how do we cultivate that? They need to see themselves in the picture.
Excellent.
Us standing in front of them.
Excellent
If they
point.
don't see us standing in front of them, they say, that's
It's not
my
possible.
preference.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not my preference. And I'm gonna go ahead and major in criminal justice. I mean, all the friends I went to school with, you talking about the brothers and my Hispanic brothers, criminal justice and business. Everybody wanted to create their own business. Everybody wanted to do criminal justice. And it was like this small handful of men that majored in education, major in education.
So what we about to do? We about to just open up our own schools? Like what we about to do? like I know you said strategic. We have to do this, and I feel like I live in a place where, and Ron always knows, I feel like I live in a place where things were historically created, but we're like a drawing board where we're open to things actually happening. Like we're like a canvas for things actually being created and happening.
So here's how you have to do it in education. If you try to develop your own school, you'll have certain forces that'll be very manipulative and demise it, and they'll be very sneaky. And so therefore, you have to start from the ground zero in a sense of creating it in the classroom. We do have those males that show that masculine approach, that also believe in empowerment as well, but also are in touch with their empathy, their empathetic side. So they have a great balance, but here's how you create it. So as principals, we empower. We got to empower those individuals to create those small incubators. And you strategically create those small incubators where you are strategically designing the next group of men of color as teachers. Because if you take it as a school, a systemic approach, you'll have so many other factors who won't give you the funding, who won't support it. They'll ask you questions. What about making this system is not inclusive? I don't see DEI in this system. So you got to be very strategic behind it, where you create that small classroom and it's very settled. And then the next group of men, you create that small classroom. And then before you know it, that you have these individuals that can pretty much encapsulate a particular school or try to get into certain areas, try to manipulate the systems.
All right, so we coming down. I want to be able to give Doc a little bit of time to talk about his book, just a little bit. I mean, I know it was, and just for us to know a little bit about it, how it came about, and what's it about.
Yeah, let me share with just the audience. So I was a principal in Chester Community Charter School, very poverty-stricken area, high levels of crime and violence. And my tenure there as a middle school principal, teachers wanted me to continue perpetuating punitive measures, out of school suspensions, evaluate the child for special ed, and get them out of my classroom. So I look for professional development because every time I did a re-entry meeting from out of school suspensions, my children and my parents and my guardians always discuss some type of forms of adversity and trauma. And I leaned over to my counselor and I said, I'm just hearing this common theme of trauma. Oh man, that frightened my counselor. Oh, I can't touch it. I'm not clinically licensed. So I said, you know what? Let me find some professional development. I need to build up my teacher's skill set. It didn't exist. It wasn't practical for the population that we serve with children of color. So I said, you know what? Instead of me complaining, I need to be a part of the solution because they're no longer going to continuously use me as a disciplinarian or like the father figure over the school. You didn't suspend long enough. You need to remove them out of my classrooms and put them in self-contained classrooms, emotional support. That wasn't the approach. So the whole impetus was from my experience as a principal, where I said, I'm going to create a product. I'm going to create professional development where I can be able to also train other schools on how to design trauma-sensitive schools. So I matriculated in the University of Pennsylvania, and I went there and I said, I'm not impressed with just a doctorate degree on my wall. No, I don't want that. I want to create a product. And as I said, I want to create a product. Then they connected me with some very insightful professors and committee chair members who were thoroughly engulfed in the work of mental health and also professional development in schools. So as I was matriculated and enrolled in University of Pennsylvania, I transformed my dissertation into this book. So this book is actually my dissertation where I trained Carson Valley, which is about 5 minutes outside of Philadelphia. And I did a whole entire year study on training, doing a needs assessment, getting feedback from all their subgroups within their programs with their faculty, and help to shape how do adults learn? How do they learn? What is their preference when it comes to professional development? And I solicited that feedback and then transformed the curriculum that I use into a practical, living and breathing trauma-informed care training manual that talks about how to design classrooms, how to design schools, focusing on what is implicit bias. How do you incorporate culturally relevant instruction that's there? And then in this particular book provides samples too, samples of the evidence, the instruments, the pre and the post training surveys that I use. It provides slides. It provides rationalization on why I change and transform and actually implemented a particular piece of curriculum. And then this gives you feedback on how the participants responded to the trainings that's there, all within my book that can be found on Amazon.com. So my book is, if you go on to Amazon.com and you type in a principal's mission in designing trauma-informed care schools, and you type in my name, it will pop up there. But that was the driving force where I wanted to be part of the solution and say, we're going to dismantle this school to prison pipeline.
Now, are you available for PDs?
Yes. And I have my, I'm the lead proprietor for resiliencyconsultants.com. So yes, I'm also an educational consultant.
Okay. Mm-hmm. This is good. I mean, this is brilliant. Dr. Ron, I mean, kudos on the guest. Like this is.
Yeah, well, listen. Let me tell you something.
This is
again another example. I say that when we want to do Therapy Thursday, want to do it with a purpose. Listen, we had a full gamut of. We talked about education. We talked about black family, black marriage and family, and then we came back and closed up with education, and also talked about Brother Kurt's book, and a book that is wonderful. And I say that because so often there's a lot of people out here getting dissertations, right? And they can't do nothing with them, right? There's no practical work done. I know that because my dissertation is a practical dissertation. It was full of research, and all the results from it can be used, and I'm using every day in settings. And soon as the copywriting is finished, I'll be putting some of those tidbits out and for trainings and what have you. But I think that this is what we're looking at, that understanding that there's not people around here just, as I like to say, just popping the posh, right? So when someone says, "Oh, hey, Kurt," at the job, I'll call you Mr. Kurt at the job, right? And they do it. You want to say it's not intentional, but you end up observing and seeing it is intentional, because when they speak to the other person they make sure they say, "Oh, Dr. McCain, Dr. So why you keep calling me Mr. Ron? You know, why does that, how does that happen? Would that occur?" And I think that, we have to, that is that part of that also, and I hate to say it, a part of that masculine decline. Like, we'll say, "Oh, don't worry about calling me. Just call me, whatever. I'm just happy to be here to work and do whatever needs to be done." And that what does that show our kids? What does that show them in that manner? Because imagine a kid recognizing and understanding what it means to be affiliated with a person who is looking like them, coming from the environment that they come from, being a doctor, being a PhD, being a doctoral researcher. What does that look like for them? That is so important for to give them the connection of saying, "How do I become and what do I do later on in life?" So again, we come to the end again. Doc, I want to thank you so much, man. We tried so hard to get you here, and it's great because
it's well worth the wait. Well worth the wait.
Right, and it happened at the right time, right?
Absolutely.
During the time we have celebrating, close to our anniversary month of starting Therapy Thursday almost 3 years ago, and we're here, still here, really contributing, not foolishness and shenanigans.
Right.
People have a lot of these, whatever they call them, they bring people on, talk about foolishness and shenanigans that do not help our community. They may be entertaining, but they're not productive to, in many instances, to be able to help people move from one space to the other. And I know that right now tonight, people got a lot of important information that they can use. If it wasn't from what they need to do at their school, understanding how the school system works, understanding how important education is for their children, the change in education over the years, what it looks like to have self-care in our Black families, what the Black fathers and Black men do to really re-engage and establish a community for their family. Listen, we touch so many things, and I know Tyler just biting at the chomp to say, this is why he loves this so much. It is it gives this, and this is an intellectual conversation.
Right.
No, and I tell people all the time, listen, you want to come and go somewhere. Listen, we're here to talk about serious issues that affect our communities, that can help our communities. And so that's what we're here to do. Again, I want to thank my good brother for being here today.
Thank you.
Fun, Tylon.
Don't forget about Sister to Sister. We got.
Oh well, we ain't forget. We ain't forget. Do I got to get that $45 for you to say something? And you the spokesperson to say something, right?
Dr. Callands, I want to thank you so very much for coming on tonight on behalf of Sisters for Sisters and coming to this. It is amazing to see your Black excellence. Okay, I just want to give you those flowers because I have 4 sons, so ranging from the ages of almost 22 to my baby is 7. So, and I know the impact that seeing themselves when they go to their school and their teachers and the staff has on them. So I appreciate you for being out here representing and encouraging and showing others how to be this way. So I wish you continuous blessings to you, to your family, to everything that you touch and that you do.
Thank you, and thank you for
Ooh,
this.
hey, let me get my $100. That's more than $45. That was $100, and hey, oh boy, that was a way that I can't even top that. All I can say is, hey, again, thank everybody for joining us for Therapy Thursday. Thank my guests. Thank the Therapy Thursday crew for being here. And then remember, Sisters for Sisters, this is our anniversary month. We have our next guest next week as well. It's a surprise. I'm not going to say who it is. They're going to come and probably we're probably going to go into a place that is a throwback to when Sisters for Sisters started Therapy Thursday almost 3 years ago. So it's going to be very interesting when we go and touch back with that person and see where they're at and what they're doing today. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining us. You can definitely join us next week. If you haven't done so, go to the Sisters for Sisters page, join, like, see the kind of important things that they are doing. And you'll see us here again next week, Therapy Thursday. We are back and back in action. With that being said, good night, good night, good night.
Thank you so much. Good night, you guys.